And shifting focus now to Indonesia, 27 years after the Southeast Asian nation's transition to democracy, the fears of return to the country's authoritarian past are growing among its people. Now this as Indonesia's parliament unanimously passed a controversial overhaul of a law that will allocate more civilian posts for military officers. Once signed into law, military officers will be able to take up positions in government without first retiring or resigning from the armed forces. Now, the legislative revisions were proposed by allies of President Prabowo Subianto, a former military general who served under longtime Indonesian dictator, and his former father-in-law, Suharto. Now, the move has triggered a stunning showdown between President Subianto and his critics, who warn that the parliamentary approval for military's increased role in the Indonesian life will erode the country's hard-won democracy. Protesters outside the Indonesian parliament clashed violently with the police. In a show of resistance, they set fire to cardboard and even pulled down the parliament fence, despite being sprayed with water cannons by military personnel. Many Indonesians fear that the new amendment will not just expand military's role in civilian life, but will also bring back dual function of the military, infamous during the dictator Suharto's time. Critics also accuse President Subianto of pushing for the controversial amendment behind closed doors to avoid public debate.
I don't want the dual function system to happen again because at the time it was done there had been a lot of abuse of power. And to think that it would happen to my child, my family, honestly scared me very much.
There's always a tendency in drafting a law in a hasty, closed door, and sometimes by creating an emergency atmosphere so that the community cannot effectively supervise the legislation.
Until now, active military officers could only serve in ministries or state institutions related to security under a landmark 2004 law that reduced the military's role in civil affairs. But the new amendment threatens to undo Indonesia's hard-won democratic present, and with President Subianto himself leading parliamentary approval for the military's role in the Indonesian civilian life, the spotlight is back on the populist leader's past, which is intimately linked with the country's former dictator, Suharto. Suharto, Indonesia's authoritarian leader for 30 years between 1968 and 1998, is widely seen to have pushed the country into separatist turmoil alongside appalling human rights abuses. President Subianto served as a military general under Suharto between 1983 and 1998. He was also married to Suharto's daughter, Titiek Suharto. Now, according to both local and international rights observers, the 73-year-old president is accused of leading shocking human rights abuses during Suharto's dictatorial regime. Now, the Indonesian president allegedly commanded a military unit which abducted and tortured several democracy activists during the dying days of the Suharto regime in late 1990s. For this, Subianto was fired from the army in 1998. He then went into self-exile at the cusp of the country's democratic transition. Subianto made his comeback shortly before the 2004 elections and started his own party. He contested both in 2014 and 2019 presidential elections and lost to the former President Joko Widodo. But in 2024, Subianto tasted a decisive electoral victory to claim presidency. 52% of Indonesians, 270 million people, are aged between 18 and 39. Presenting himself as a quote-unquote gemoy, or cute grandfather, on TikTok, President Subianto managed to click this exact voter base to claim power. But now, many of Indonesia's youngsters are seeing a future that is just like their country's dark past, authoritarian and full of military's intrusion in civilian life.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Lakshman.
Good afternoon.
Making headlines in India well before you landed here.
New Delhi has raised concerns in the recent past vis-a-vis the Khalistani separatists that operate in New Zealand. How do you propose to address these concerns?
In our democracy, we believe in the freedom of speech.
Organizations like the Al-Qaeda or ISIS were to hold a referendum in New Zealand, something related to one of your Western partners. Would you say the same?
We have very well-defined laws in our democracy.
No specific conversation on Khalistan on this visit.
It was raised with me. I also raised back our position.
Are you willing to be open to these concerns from New Delhi?
As I keep coming back to you to say, we have strong laws in our system.
Do you think that Ukraine is at its weakest position?
This war is not about Ukraine.
Do you believe that your president was insulted? Yes or no question. Is Ukraine prepared to pay the price for that peace?
No compromises at the cost of territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Diplomacy will work?
Yes,
Do you
it
think
will.
Russia will give up the territory if there is no ceasefire? Do you propose to keep fighting?
We are ready to resist.
Do you think there will be peace?
Many countries gave us 3 days.
President Trump said you don't have any cards.
We do not have another choice.
How do you keep fighting?
You ask me once again the same question.
Because you've not
We
answered my
have-
question.
We have enough capacities to keep fighting.